The promise that could define Princess Leonor's future as Queen. Princess Leonor made her constitutional promise at just 18 years old. But what if the most important part of that promise hasn't happened yet? Because one day, Leonor may no longer be standing in Parliament as the young heir to the Spanish throne. She may be standing before the nation as Queen of Spain. And when that day comes, the word she committed herself to as an 18-year-old could take on an entirely different meaning. Her promise wasn't simply about a ceremony. It was about the kind of monarch she is expected to become. A monarch who must respect the Constitution. A monarch who must operate within clearly defined limits. A monarch who may have to represent Spaniards who don't always agree with one another. And perhaps most challenging of all, a monarch who must understand politics without becoming a politician. So what exactly could Leonor's promise mean for her future reign? And what will Spain expect from the woman who may one day wear the crown? Let's look beyond the ceremony and into the future. The promise was only the beginning when Leonor made her constitutional oath at 18. It marked an important moment in her journey. But the real significance may only become clear much later. Think about making a promise when you're 18 and then carrying that responsibility for decades. The person making the promise is still young, but the responsibility attached to it can last a lifetime. That is what makes Leonor's situation so unusual. Her constitutional commitment isn't something she can simply leave behind after graduation. If she eventually becomes queen, that commitment will become part of the foundation of her reign. And that means the oath can be viewed as the beginning of a much longer journey. What will Spain expect from her? So what will Spain actually expect from Leonor? The answer goes far beyond wearing a crown. A modern constitutional monarch is expected to represent the state. That means appearing at major national occasions, receiving foreign leaders, representing Spain internationally, supporting national institutions, and performing constitutional duties. But there's an important limitation. Leonor will not become an elected politician. She won't be expected to campaign for political parties. She won't be there to decide which political ideology should govern Spain. Instead, her challenge will be representing the country as a whole. And that may be one of the most difficult responsibilities waiting for her. Understanding politics without becoming political. Imagine being queen of a country where millions of people have completely different political opinions. Some strongly support the government, others strongly oppose it. Some support the monarchy, others don't. And yet the monarch is expected to represent the nation as a whole. That's why Leonor's education matters. She needs to understand politics, but she also needs to maintain constitutional neutrality. This is a delicate balance. She must know what's happening in the country without becoming a political participant in the same way an elected leader is. And that may become one of the defining skills of her future reign. Why her education could matter. This is where Leonor's academic journey becomes particularly interesting. Her education isn't simply about collecting qualifications. It can help her understand the institutions she may one day represent. Politics, history, international affairs, law, economics, diplomacy. These subjects can provide the intellectual foundation for a future head of state. But education alone doesn't create a successful monarch. Leonor also needs experience. And that's why her military training and official engagements matter too. Each experience gives her another perspective. From the military to the crown. Leonor's military education may seem completely separate from her constitutional promise. But there's a connection. Military training emphasizes service, discipline, and responsibility. The Constitution defines the responsibilities and limits of the crown. Her future role could require her to understand both. She may eventually have an important relationship with Spain's armed forces. That doesn't mean she will personally run military operations. It means she'll need to understand the institution she may one day represent as head of state. And the more she learns now, the more prepared she can potentially be for that responsibility later. Leonor won't only represent Spain at home. Another major part of her future could be international representation. The Queen of Spain isn't only a domestic figure. The Spanish monarch represents the country abroad. That could mean state visits, diplomatic meetings, international ceremonies, meetings with other heads of state, and moments when Spain's image is being represented to the world. Leonor will therefore need to understand international affairs. She'll need to know how Spain fits into Europe and the wider international community. And this is another reason why her education and preparation are so important. The hardest part may be personal, but there's a side to Leonor's future that we often overlook. Her responsibilities won't only be professional. They could affect her personal life too. Every monarch has to balance public duty with private life. Relationships, friendships, travel, family, personal choices. For Leonor, those things may receive enormous public attention, and that's where her constitutional promise becomes especially interesting. The crown may eventually require her to place duty ahead of personal convenience. Not necessarily every time, but often enough that the distinction between Princess Leonor and Queen Leonor could become increasingly difficult to separate. The person behind the crown, and yet, Leonor remains a person. This is important. She isn't simply a constitutional position. She's a young woman growing up under extraordinary public attention. She will have her own personality, her own interests, her own relationships, her own hopes. But eventually, the crown could require her to make decisions with consequences beyond herself. That's one of the realities of hereditary monarchy. The person and the institution become closely connected, and Leonor's preparation appears designed to help her understand that difference. A different Spain may greet her. There's another uncertainty we cannot ignore. The Spain Leonor eventually becomes queen of may not look like today's Spain. Societies change, technology changes, political expectations change, the relationship between citizens and institutions changes, and the monarchy itself will have to adapt to whatever future Spain looks like. That means Leonor cannot simply copy everything previous monarchs did. She'll need to understand tradition while responding to a changing society. That may be one of her greatest challenges. How do you preserve an institution while allowing it to evolve? What kind of queen will she become? And this is where we reach the biggest unanswered question. What kind of queen will Leonor actually be? Will she be highly visible? Will she prefer a quieter style? Will she focus heavily on international diplomacy? Will she emphasize national unity? Will she modernize aspects of royal life? We simply don't know yet. Anyone claiming to know exactly what Leonor's reign will look like is making predictions, not reporting facts. But we can examine her preparation. And that preparation suggests something important. Spain is preparing her for a role that requires knowledge, discipline, constitutional awareness, and public service. Princess Leonor's constitutional promise was made when she was only 18, but its greatest meaning may belong to the future. Because one day, the young woman who stood before Spain's representatives could become the woman standing at the center of the country's constitutional monarchy. And when that happens, the promise she made as a teenager will no longer seem like a distant ceremony. It will become part of the responsibility she carries every day. She'll have to understand politics without becoming partisan, represent Spain without representing only one side, respect tradition without becoming trapped by the past, and balance the demands of the crown with the reality of being human. That's why Leonor's journey is so fascinating. The crown isn't simply something she may inherit one day. It's a responsibility she's been preparing for since childhood, and the promise she made at May 18th eventually become one of the foundations of the queen she becomes. But there's one question we haven't answered yet. What happens when Leonor's constitutional duty collides with the traditions and expectations surrounding her personal life? That's where her journey toward the crown gets even more complicated.